Hi guys, Olive here. Here today to tell you about the handful of new releases that are all due to come out in January, February, and March 2026 that I am most excited to get my hands on. I've been keeping an eye on catalogs for 2026, and let me tell you, there are so many good books coming out next year. Everything from literary fiction to narrative nonfiction to cozy reads that I could really see myself curling up with on a cold day. I spent far too long compiling a really long list of titles that I then spent even longer narrowing down to just the ones I am most hyped about. Some of these do come from authors that I already know and trust. Some of them are debut authors, and then others are complete wildcards that I hope surprise me in the best way possible. We'll move chronologically through the 3 months that I'll be focusing on in this video. So of course, we're going to start with January, and my list begins on the 13th with 2 new releases coming out on that day. The first one is a bookish novel called The Bookbinder's Secret by A.D. Bell. And this book seems to be part historical fiction, part locked room mystery, part love letter to old books, with just a touch of magic thrown in there as well. Our heroine is a bookseller in 1901 Oxford, and we see her investigating the mystery behind this 50-year-old letter that she found tucked inside a burned book that randomly turned up on her desk. This one seems like the kind of book that would keep you up all night reading. But a collection of nonfiction pieces coming out on the 13th also got my attention. It's called The Snake That Ate Florida: Reporting, Essays, and Criticism by Ian Fraser. And this book gathers together selected pieces from this journalist's 50-year career, many of which were originally written for The New Yorker. Some of them date all the way back to the 1970s, but then others were written within the last year. I'm hearing great things about this, and it seemed to me to be the ideal nightstand book, like one I could chip away at before bed each night. Moving on to the 20th of January, there are 2 releases coming out on that day that I'm hyped about. Once again, one fiction, one nonfiction, and the novel is called The Infamous Gilberts by Angela Tomasky. And this book's gloomy tone seemed like it would perfectly match up with the dreary January Pittsburgh days that I have ahead of me. This is the story of 5 siblings who live in a once stately English country manor with their mother, but the property is now crumbling. And as the entire state is being converted into a hotel, we dive into the backgrounds of each of these family members. I saw one person say that this book is kind of like Downton Abbey, but if the home had fallen to ruin. So, not a cheerful book by any means, but hey, I like a good moody read every now and then. The nonfiction book that's due to come out on January 20th is called The Oak and the Larch: A Forest History of Russia and Its Empires by Sophie Pinkham. And this is an environmental history of Russia's enormous forest land, which stretch from the Baltic all the way over to the Pacific. And it also talks about how the forest land of Russia has both contributed to, but then also resisted the many empires that have controlled it. This book seems to sit at the center of a Venn diagram of all of my weird niche interests, so I may even need to pre-order this one. To close out the first month of the year, there are 2 January 27th novels that I am highly anticipating. The first one is called A Great Act of Love by Heather Rose, a historical novel based on true events. It is set in the 1840s. Our main character starts off by living with her family in England. Her family runs an apothecary. But after tragedy strikes, she heads out to what is now known as Tasmania, where she reestablishes a vineyard that grows grapes to make champagne. I have heard that this one is gorgeous. It is a sweeping family saga, and that it completely sucks you in. And I am always down to read a book like that. The other January 27th novel I'm looking forward to, though, is from an author I've previously read, a Japanese author named Emi Yagi. Her new book is going to be called When the Museum is Closed. And just like her last book, this is a story that wades waist deep in the absurd. This is a book in which the main character is hired by a museum to come in after hours and converse in Latin with the statue of Venus, but our main character ends up falling in love with the statue. I'm not normally one for books that are this weird. I tend to prefer my stories to be a little bit more realistic, but I'm confident I'm going to enjoy this because I was really impressed by her previous book, which was called Diary of a Void. I actually reviewed it for Harvard Review. I'll link that review for you below if you want to hear more about that book, but I'm hoping to enjoy this new one as much as I liked the last one. But now onto the month of February, when actually the vast majority of my anticipated releases for this quarter are coming out. The first new release Tuesday of the month is the 3rd, when The Company of Owls by Polly Atkin will hit shelves, here in the United States anyway. This short memoir was previously published in the UK, and in it the author shares her own love of owls and invites us as readers into a celebration of these nocturnal creatures. If you know anything about me, you know I love birds of prey in particular. I have actually already reviewed 2 books on owls here on my channel before, but I am always up for reading more. February 3rd will also bring us Antique by Seth Panich, a lightly magical novel following an antiques appraiser who's having a bit of an identity crisis. She wants to revive her once vibrant career, and she's hoping to do so by signing on for this amateur traveling antique show, but she ends up getting caught up in the strange power that's contained within this mysterious necklace. The premise of this one reminded me so much of Mr. Penumbra's 24-hour bookstore, except with antiques instead of books, a female main character instead of a male lead, yet hopefully it has all of that same charm. I really want to end up being right about that comparison. The next 2 Tuesdays in February seem like they're going to be bigger release dates within the book industry because I have 4 books coming out on February 10th to tell you about. The first one is A Slow and Secret Poison by Carmela Locus. This is a historical Gothic novel in which a young gardener takes a job at a crumbling English manor in the 1920s. And apparently this one has all of the spooky atmosphere and family secrets that you want out of a book like this. Next up is a memoir from a semi-local, to me anyway, university press. It's one of my favorites, West Virginia University Press, and they're going to be releasing Dizzy by Rachel Weaver, in which this author chronicles her 18-year-long struggle with an undiagnosed illness. Days before she started an MFA program, she woke up feeling so dizzy and completely unable to function, and that feeling persisted for over a decade and went on to stump more than 30 doctors before she actually found out what was going on with her. I think if you're the kind of reader who really enjoyed a book like Rain on Fire by Susanna Cahalan, or if, sadly, you yourself have experienced the many limitations of the American medical system, you might want to consider putting this on your TBR. The third February 10th release on my list is a debut novel called The Jills by Karen Parkman. This is a thriller starring a professional Buffalo Bills cheerleader who's doing everything she can to solve the disappearance of one of her very close friends, who's also her teammate. But that search leads her down some pretty dark paths, both into the seedy side of the city, but then also inward into her own complicated family history. Female friendship, a good mystery, a dash of sports thrown in there. This one sounded so unique. But speaking of mysteries, I also have my eye on a locked room mystery that just got an English language translation. It's called The Final Problem by Arturo Perez Reverte. This one is set in 1960 on an isolated Greek island, and we follow an aging actor who is best known for playing Sherlock Holmes. But as such, he gets pressured to solve a suspicious death that happens, of course, when he's trying to relax on vacation. I have been on the hunt for a good mystery. I'm waiting for Ashley Weaver to come out with a new series, but in the meantime, I need a good mystery to read. And this one is being advertised as being perfect for fans of The White Lotus, which I definitely am. There are another 4 books coming out on February 17th that I wanted to chat about, and from me going through all of those book catalogs, I can tell you this is definitely going to be the season for cozy reads, and one that I suspect is going to be a big one is called Agnes Aubert's Mystical Cat Shelter by Heather Fawcett. This one is also set in the 1920s, but in this one, we follow a woman who runs a cat rescue in Montreal, and we see her seeking out the help of a curmudgeonly wizard to help save the shelter. Like many other book lovers out there, I adore cats. I have 2 of my own. My entire life essentially revolves around them. I've also done some volunteer work at my local shelter. I know I'm going to find this one utterly heartwarming. Another one that'll provide some warmth this winter is called Bottom Shelf: How a Forgotten Brand of Bourbon Saved One Man's Life by Fred Minnick. This is a memoir written by a combat veteran who was suffering from PTSD when he became fascinated by the lost legacy of this one specific brand of bourbon. And through investigating this whiskey, he not only developed an appreciation for whiskey in general, he found a way to cope with his mental health struggles, but he also accidentally became an influential liquor expert. This sounds like such an interesting story, and I myself have developed an appreciation for bourbon in the latter half of this year, so this is coming along at just the right time for me. One that I am really hoping will fill a hole in my heart is So Young, So Old by Grant Ginder. And in this novel, over 20 years and 5 different parties, we see 6 college friends as they navigate love, careers, changing relationships, and we generally get to see how their friendships evolve over time. When I read that premise, I was immediately reminded of one of my all-time favorites, The Interestings by Meg Wolitzer. What I wouldn't give to be able to read it for the first time again. I have reread it, but it's never the same as that first read. I love that book so much, but since I can't go back and read it for the first time again, I am hoping that this book will give me similar feelings, especially since we've had a major Meg Wolitzer drought since 2018. But the last book in this February 17th quartet is a very interesting take on true crime. It's called The Blood Countess: Murder, Betrayal, and the Making of a Monster by Shelley Puhak. And this book tells the maybe true story of a powerful Hungarian noblewoman who, along with some of her servants, was accused of killing hundreds of girls and women from the late 16th into the early 17th century. But even though these stories made her legendary and certainly one of the most prolific female serial killers of all time, there are now questions about whether or not any of it was actually true. This book draws upon new evidence to hopefully answer the question once and for all: was this woman a victim, a monster, or maybe even both? To close out the month of February, there are 2 more coming out on February 24th that I wanted to mention. The first one I'm going to tell you about is actually the only other work of true crime on my list for this quarter, and it's called The Death of Trotsky: The True Story of the Plot to Kill Stalin's Greatest Enemy by Josh Ireland. This is an account of the assassination of Leon Trotsky, Stalin's main political competitor and thus someone he considered to be an enemy. He was determined to eliminate Trotsky as a competitor as he was trying to consolidate power, and even though it took a decade in a wild game of cat and mouse, Trotsky was eventually found and killed in Mexico in 1940. I have been a student of Soviet history for many years now. I, of course, know the high-level overview of this story, but I can't say I've ever read much about the details, so I am particularly interested to read this. But the next February 24th release will also bring me something familiar in the form of the literary fiction powerhouse that is Lauren Groff. She's going to be releasing her 3rd collection of short stories on February 24th, and it's going to be called Brawler. This is going to be a collection of 9 short stories that are set anywhere from the 1950s up to the modern day, but they all apparently explore the conflict that happens between the good and evil elements of human nature. Although I am much more of a dabbler in short fiction, I only pick it up sometimes, I am a committed fan of Lauren Groff, so I will be reading this eventually. But now let's move on to the month of March, and there's one book on my list coming out on the 3rd, a paperback original debut novel titled The Encore by Juliet Eizon. This is a book that begins in 2003, where we see 2 people who we know later go on to become very famous, successful musicians. We see them meet first as young people at an elite performing arts school in Boston. But then there's a second storyline, and we find out that these 2 people, even though they went their separate ways, they were the birth parents of a girl who went on to become a teenage prodigy. And she goes on the hunt for her birth parents after she loses her adoptive mother, and once she finds them, they all very unconventionally decide to go on tour together. This one sounds perfect for us fans of Daisy Jones and the Six. 2 weeks later, on March 17th, there are 4 books of note coming out, including one with a breathtaking cover, Underwater by Tara Menon, a beautiful and haunting short novel all about female friendship. Our main character loses her mother at 5, then goes to Thailand with her marine biologist father, where she meets a female friend whose legacy will follow our main character long into her adulthood. This is one I could see myself getting lost in during a weekend afternoon. I know I said earlier that cozy reads are the theme of this season, and that is definitely true because I have one more to tell you about that comes out on the 17th. It's called The Somewhat Wicked Witch of Brigandale by C.M. Wagoner. The main character of this book is a witch who raises an abandoned baby that she found, and she loves him so much that she actually plans to sabotage a prophecy that her son is somehow the lost prince of this kingdom. This sounds like such a delight. But there are 2 nonfiction books coming out on the 17th too, including The Secret History of French Cooking, The Outlaw Chefs Who Made Food Modern by Luc Barr. This book zooms in on some renegade French chefs of the 60s and 70s who apparently brought about a revolution in the cooking world, but then we also follow a group of female chefs who were fighting for recognition in this very male-dominated world. But also, there's apparently this villainous food critic looming over all of them throughout this entire book. I'm going to have to make a reservation at a French restaurant when I'm reading this. The final March 17th release I wanted to chat about is called The Feather Wars and the Great Crusade to Save America's Birds by James H. McCommons. This is a history of America's bird conservation movement, which kicked off following the shockingly rapid demise of the once plentiful passenger pigeon, and this book traces the fight to save bird species and their habitats over the next 5 decades. As I said near the start of this video, I adore birds, so this one is at the top of my TBR. Then jumping ahead another 2 weeks to the final new release date of this quarter, March 31st, there are 2 nonfiction books coming out on that day that I wanted to shine a spotlight on, and one of them comes from an author I already know I love. It's going to be called True Color, The Strange and Spectacular Quest to Define Color, From Azure to Zinc Pink by Corey Stamper. This book sounds so strange and yet somehow so perfect. It's this look at how we define color, but through the lens of this 1930s era up-and-coming scientist who was hired by Merriam-Webster to help revise their dictionary. So it's sort of a biography of this man, but it's also a look at the psychology of color, the science behind how we look at color. It's a little bit of this and a little bit of that. And that's not at all surprising if you know anything about this author. She previously worked for Merriam-Webster, and she wrote this fascinating and hilarious memoir meets history book called Word by Word, which was one of my favorite reads of 2021. I loved it. If this book has the personality of Word by Word, if I love it even half as much as Word by Word, then it's going to be a favorite read of the year. But the final new release of this quarter that I will be talking about in this video is yet another oddball, genre-defying work of nonfiction called Kaczynski's Egg, a family story of obsession, love, and loss by Serena Kaczynski. This book seems to blend memoir, history, and art, as this author tells a family story of how her father Paul started an ultimately ruinous project to create the world's largest jeweled egg. He was intending to rival Fabergé's creations, but within 10 years of making it, he was dead and the egg disappeared. And in this book, the author tells the story of its creation, but then also talks about how she set out to find out what ultimately happened to the egg. I am such a sucker for truly singular nonfiction reading experiences. The kind where you finish the last page and you have to take a second just to think, what did I just read? And it seems like this book has the potential to gift me one of those experiences. But those are the books coming out in the first 3 months of 2026 that I am most excited to read. But these definitely aren't all the books coming out within that same time frame. There are too many to mention. So if there are any that you are really excited about that I neglected to mention in this video, please do let me know what those are down in the comments. Also, let me know down in the comments if any of the ones I spoke about today made their way onto your TBR. Maybe there's one you'd like to see me review. review. That always helps me know what to post next here on my channel. Put any or all of that down in the comments. All the books that I did speak about today are listed and linked for you in the description box below for your clicking convenience. And at the very bottom of that exact same description box, you'll also see links to everywhere you can find me around the internet. So Goodreads, the Storygraph, Instagram, all the places I'm the most active, in case you want to keep up with what I am reading and doing right now. Thanks so much for watching. I hope you're having a wonderful day. I'll see you in the next video. Bye.